If the world was ending tomorrow, what would you do about it? That's the question you struggle with in Final Fantasy VII. And you struggle with it against the backdrop of a world in turmoil. Traditionally, RPGs had been set in times where kings ruled, and oppressive monarchs seeking more power were often the main threat. But Final Fantasy VII put you in a new setting and made you consider that it might not just be kings and emperors that pose a threat to peace and life itself. In the very first situation of the game, you take on a very different role than most other role-playing games up to that point. You didn't wake up in a bed to mom's call like many other JRPGs because you'd slept in and the pie was ready. You were a mercenary. And on top of that, you were getting paid to be an eco-terrorist. You were literally doing something most people would never do to an enemy that most people would not look at and say drastic measures need to be taken. You're blowing up a reactor, part of a power plant, owned by a company that runs the world. But it also gives energy to a huge city populated with many normal people that you're going to affect. In 1997, this was one of the most morally gray things I'd ever seen in a video game. Underlyingly, it was good, but underneath it there were consequences. People that were affected that had nothing to do with it. People that were just living their lives. Final Fantasy VII was a different kind of game. It started you out deep in the middle of a city and showed you a gritty, underprivileged life of poverty and a lack of control. And not only did that first mission show you exactly how far it had come by way of showing you exactly how far people will go, it also introduced you to my favorite version of the turn-based JRPG-style battle system. It was just the right balance of complexity and planning along with urgency. Instead of being fully turn-based, you had to make decisions on a counter, and if you didn't do it fast enough, you essentially forfeited your turn. Even the way magic was handled in the game, by tying it in with the resource that Shinra, the power company, was mining, specifically the life stream, as small crystallized stones formed from it, could give people abilities instead of them just randomly having them, in its own way actually grounded the idea of magic, a fantasy element in an otherwise run-down dystopian future, and made it play into the world and what you were thinking about at all times. It was legitimately part of it. It wasn't just these amazing feats that people could do that helped you get further. It was an example of the power that Shinra was mining from the world and told you exactly what it was they were wielding. You could carry a stone around and shoot fire out of your hands. They were pumping this stuff out of the ground thousands of gallons at a time. Needless to say, the odds were against you. But it wasn't just the world, it was the people in it, with a set of characters that were all very, very different from each other, with different goals, different approaches, different attitudes, and different motivations. Having everyone come together for a single goal made it so much more obvious how important that goal was. Once an enemy was introduced, that this massive corporation you were fighting was scared of themselves, you knew things just got real. The world it was set against was beautiful, dense. From Midgar, which was an oppressive, dirty city ruled by a greedy corporation, to Cosmo Canyon, a place with people filled only with a thirst for knowledge, to the City of the Ancients, a place that reminded you that people weren't always like this, but somebody ruined it. It was a game that was filled with an unending dread. You were constantly under the threat of not just the world ending, but your world ending. To put it simply, Cloud Strife was a confused man, and there weren't many constants in his life. He was tough to get through to, and one of the few people that managed to get through was taken from him. Not a whole lot of us saw that coming either. Final Fantasy VII is a dramatic game, one that makes you examine the world around you, because it presents you with so many parallels. It's also fun as hell. From little gophers that attack you in the countryside to the biggest weapon unleashed by the planet onto you, a human, viewed as a threat by the planet. The battles can be exhilarating, and to lighten the mood a little bit, you can participate in a giant bird racing league. It's a game filled with sadness and learning to deal with life, and of course, stopping the powerful from making grave mistakes. I'm sure among people that love this game as much as I do, there's 100 different reasons for what made Final Fantasy VII so great. But for me, even though the game wasn't perfect, it truly opened my eyes as to what games could be.